Let's go ahead and move into our insights from outside the classroom. Kelly, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, so we saw that graph earlier from Project Tomorrow about PD being the #1 challenge, and when we talked about the respondents of this who identified themselves in a role outside of the teaching roles that we had as a selection, I thought it was interesting here that yes, we see PD as a challenge, but we talked earlier about how do you overcome the lack of time, and if we see here the lack of collaboration being a challenge, I thought that was really interesting. And part of that's because, we work with a lot of districts, and the district I came from was very heavily into PLCs. And so my thinking was, well, we have, PLCs because they're so prevalent, collaboration is just happening. I think that in my head, thought it would be not the challenge. I did not think it would be #3. I also wanted to bring out #5 because we were talking about effective pedagogy earlier, and the assessing and reporting on teaching strategy and effectiveness. That's something I think that all of us are concerned about, and especially when you think about the work that John Hattie has done and Robert Marzano on what do we do that has the most impact on student learning. That's still going to be something that we continue to try to figure out. As educators and as those who really are passionate about what happens in the classroom.
And with me, that it's amazing what a difference adjectives make, right? So for instance, the very first one that was the top challenge is providing relevant and effective professional development. If this question would have just stated providing professional development, I'm not thinking that this one would have been as high. But the minute you start using the terms like relevant and effective, that's where you start having the issues. And I think, even as we go through the rest of the data in this presentation, and as you individually have a chance to look at the survey results yourself, I think you're going to see that professional development keep coming up again and again. The key is around the relevance of that PD and also the effectiveness.
Well, that's a good point, Adam. So we want to throw it at the audience again. So in your opinion, what PD strategy is most effective out of this list? I'll have that pull up for you in just a second. So we have single session workshops, regular coaching, periodic workshops, online blended courses, and on-demand or asynchronous PD. Excellent. Well, I'm going to go ahead and close this for time's sake here and share your results. Wow. Regular coaching, 48% agree that is the most effective. Kelly, you had mentioned that based on other research that this is meant to be the most effective. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I was actually reading an article about implementation from Learning Forward, and there was a research study done, and this is back in 2002 from Joyce and Showers. But they had this chart about the actual impact of different like PD strategies and whether or not that actually translated to classroom practice. And they had study of theory, a demonstration, doing some practice on their own, and the actual transfer to actual practice was like 0 for study of theory and demonstration, and it was only 5% of the participants had an increase for practice, but with peer coaching, it was 95%. And that's just such a crazy high number for effective PD strategies. So I thought that kind of fleshed out this very well.
Yeah, well, now that we know what the audience thinks is the most effective, let's take a look. Oh, go ahead, Adam.
I would also add that Schoology webinars are probably the most effective PD strategy, just so everyone knows.
I think actually, Don made a great comment in chat about what works for kids usually works for adults too. That's such a great point. Sometimes I don't know why we don't often think of adult learning sometimes mirroring what we think is most effective for students.
Well, let's take a look at what types of PD are actually out there. So this is a question on, we asked what types of PD are being practiced in your institution. So you could answer multiple, have multiple answers here.
So, and this is, again, what's really interesting here is that, the top, 2 of the top 3 answers, the periodic workshops and the single session workshops, like for instance, in the poll that we just took with our audience here, 5% of them thought that single session workshops was the most effective. And it's really interesting to think about if our institutions are practicing certain types of PD, but the vast majority of individuals don't feel that's effective, that's where we have an issue. Now, it's interesting when it comes to single session workshops, they are probably going to be the most common simply because there are things that institutions have to do, right? We have to do a training on this. We have to do development on that. And, the state is requiring us, things like that. So I definitely understand that process. But we can't allow those mandated kind of trainings dictate our other things. And specifically, if I scroll down this list here, I look, only 18% of those who were polled said that the online or blended courses are part of their PD that's being practiced. So, I mean, even in those single session workshops, you could still utilize a blended kind of learning environment to provide that information. I know in Schoology we do that all the time as we're helping institutions start implementing Schoology throughout their institution. That's one of the big things, is taking the things that they're already doing, like bloodborne pathogen testing, which every school has to do at the beginning of the year, and putting that as part of a blended learning kind of experience. And again, the other thing too is that the two key words again is effective and relevant. Those are the biggest challenges that our admins are facing. And do we see this list as being both those things?
And look where regular ongoing coaching is. Knowing the stuff that I just read about, like how powerful that is. I hope, and I know that there's some things that make that difficult to pull off in terms of time and staffing, but I'd love to see that number go up.
Well, even in the situation where you have the video reflections or observations, this is something that we, Kelly and I, we talked about this a long time ago, is, I wish that that kind of thing would happen more in classrooms, where a teacher could be able to submit a video of them teaching and submit that as proof of their content. Like, what a great thing for teachers to be able to have really ownership of presenting themselves as teaching great lessons, even if it's for the camera. I know that there's some debate around that. I'm not going to get into that today, but like, great lessons being taught by teachers is always a good thing.
Yeah, and I think, to get back to Don's point about modeling, there's some research out there about, we should be modeling the behavior that we want to see when we're doing PD. So if we are doing PD on blended learning, it should probably be in a blended environment. So this particular piece of research came out of the Journal of Online Learning Research, and I thought this is a great quotation to pull in about how we should be modeling those professional practices and techniques for efficacy to impact and transform instruction in the classroom with fidelity. And that gets to that idea of, if we are doing something that is PD related, are we seeing that translate into practice when they're actually working with students?